Hello my international darlings and welcome to another video in Marybear's channel. And yes, that's me. A while ago, to be more specific, a year and a day ago, I made a video called the Mclennon Series, where I told you guys the beginning of it all. It was only a test and I didn't really know if you guys would enjoy, but it was something very fun to do. So here I am again, now to talk about the early days of Mclennon. For a better understanding of the first years of the partnership, I will split this video in two. In part 1, this video, I will talk about their lives in Liverpool, how they grew up together and how was their dynamic. In part 2, I will talk about the famous Paris trip they did, where they got that haircut that became a symbol in Beatles history, and discuss the song I Don't Know, Oh Johnny Johnny, recorded by them in 1960. To begin this video, I want to start with a quote from the book Many Years From Now by Barry Miles in 1997, which illustrates the starting point that I want to come from. Paul said, "We'd often get into the little glass paneled porch on the front door, looking out to the front garden and Menlove Avenue. There was a good acoustic there, like a bathroom acoustic, and also it was the only place Mimi would let us make noise. We were relegated to the vestibule. I remember singing Blue Moon in there, the Elvis version, trying to figure out the chords. We spent a lot of time like that. Then we'd go up to John's room and we'd sit on the bed and play records. Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry. It's a wonderful memory. I don't often get nostalgic, but the feeling of sitting and listening to records in John's bedroom is so lovely. A nice nostalgic feeling because I realize just how close I was to John. It's a lovely thought to think of a friend's bedroom like that. A young boy's bedroom is such a comfortable place, like my son's bedroom is now. He's got all the stuff that he needs, a candle, a guitar, a book. John's room was very like that. James reminds me very much of John in many ways. He's got beautiful hands. John had beautiful hands. We can, from this quote, create an image in our heads of this scenario. We can also analyze how well the movie Nowhere Boy portrayed their early years, because this quote immediately made me remember that scene which Paul goes to John's house for the first time. Personally, I have mixed feelings about this movie. At some points I really love it, but I also have some critics. So, by the way, if you want a video of me analyzing and giving my opinion on Nowhere Boy or any Beatles movie, let me know down in the comments. Back to the video, I would like to highlight how quickly John and Paul got closer to each other. Their mutual desire to follow a music career was one between a lot of other things they had in common. It seems that, finally, they had someone who shared the same view of the future, that understood them and their dreams. John and I grew up like twins, although he was a year and a half older than me. We grew up literally in the same bed, because when we were on a holiday, hitchhiking or whatever, we would share a bed. Or when we were writing songs as kids, he'd be in my bedroom or I'd be in his, or he'd be in my front parlor or I'd be in his, although his Aunt Mimi sometimes kicked us out into the vestibule. Paul said to New Statesman in Paul McCartney Meet the Beatles, 1997. Tony Bramwell, in his book Magical Mystery Tours, My Life with the Beatles, also pointed out how deeply they were inserted in each other's daily lives. Conveniently, the art school was right next door to the institute where Paul was a student. Elvis and rock and roll were considered very uncool by the art students, but John didn't care what they thought. He and Paul would meet up all the time in the adjoining graveyard during their lunch breaks and jammed. As the weather grew colder, they would regularly bunk off to practice and write what would become the songs. It was Paul who showed John how to play chords properly instead of banjo chords, which were all John knew. I think John was quite defensive when he realized that through much of his career with the choirman, he had been playing two-fingered banjo chords on a guitar. The thought was tempered by the fact that nobody had noticed it. John once told me, "Only that fucking McCartney shushed me out. I love him, but he's such a good musician, I could kill him." But music weren't the only thing they had in common. John and Paul also shared very similar marks in their lives, which I believe that made their bond even stronger. In that very scene of the movie I mentioned earlier, Paul tells John about his mom and how he used to deal with it. In the anthology of the Beatles, 2005, Paul said, "That became a very big bond between John and me, because he lost his mom early on too. We both had this emotional turmoil which we had to deal with, and being teenagers, we had to deal with very quickly. We both understood that something had happened that you couldn't talk about, but we could laugh about it, because each of us had gone through it. It wasn't okay for anyone else. We could both laugh at that, but only on the surface. John went through hell, but young people don't show grief. They'd rather not. Occasionally, once or twice in later years, it would hit in. We'd be sitting around and we'd have a cry together, not often, but it was good." When they became part of each other's routine, always together, always in each other's houses, they were most of the times playing and writing, but they also shared a feeling that a lot of people would describe as something greater than a music partnership. Something special was growing between them, that went past friendship as we knew it. It was as if they drew power from each other. Colin Hanton said to Bob Spitz in The Beatles, The Biography, 2005. In the same book, Eric Griffith, the first guitarist of the Choirman, said, "After a while, they'd finish each other's sentences. That's when we knew how strong their friendship had become. They'd grown that dependent on one another." Spitz also related in his work the special place Paul had in John's music studies. "Paul taught me to play properly," John recalled. "So I learned the chords upside down, because he was left-handed, and I'd go home and reverse them." And in Paul, John saw something that he'd never before consciously considered, something essential that couldn't be taught or absorbed. More than his ability or singing voice, both of which were first-rate, John admired Paul's knack for performance, his seemingly innate power to excite, to shade the music with personality. It seemed to define everything John was thinking about rock and roll and a way to perform it. That much time spent together brought intimacy. Philip Norman said in his book that teenager John would only wear his glasses in front of Paul, since he had almost a phobia of wearing them in public, thinking it was uncool. Soon, they became almost inseparable. They were together almost all of the time, even when they were not supposed to. The following quote is also from Spitz's book. "I remember I had a girlfriend called Celia. I must have been 16 or 17, about the same age as her. We went out one evening and for some reason John tagged along. I can't remember why it was. I think he would thought that I was going to see him, but I thought that I'd canceled it, and he showed up at my house. But he was a mate, and he came on a date with this Celia girl, and at the end of the date, she said, 'Why did you bring that dreadful guy?' And of course, I said, 'Well, he's alright, really.' And I think, in many ways, I always find myself doing that. It was always, well, I know he was rude, It was funny though, wasn't it? But when John started to study in Liverpool College of Art, met Stu, and started to date Sam, things became a little bit different between John and Paul. Suddenly, Paul wasn't the main character in John's life and had to share the spotlight with two new figures: a smart, intellectual, and older guy, and a beautiful, talented, and caring girl. In John Lennon, The Life, Norman, and thanks to the combined rival attractions of Cynthia and Stu, Paul McCartney had recently felt himself taking a bit of a backseat with John. But the Easter holiday of 1960 brought a major rebuilding between them. Packing up a few clothes and their guitars, the pair hitchhiked 200 miles south to stay with Paul's relatives, Mike and Beth Robbins, who were now running a pub, the Fox and Hounds, in Caversham, Berkshire. They spent a week helping out in the pub, sharing a bed in an upstairs room, as innocently as children. Also, that in 1961 they made a very important trip to Paris. Why is this trip so important? That's just what we are going to see in the next video of the series. We're also going to analyze the song I Don't Know, Oh Johnny Johnny, recorded in a very homemade style by Lennon and McCartney and never released as a Beatles nor a solo song. Why? We are going to discover that in the Mclennon Series 3. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. If you did, like this video and share with a friend you think it might like too. If you have any suggestions or critics, please let down in the comments, and every Friday I'll be posting a new video, so you know already when to come back. In the screen right now, you have my other social medias, Twitter and Instagram. If you want to, follow me there. Let's be friends. I see you in the next video. Bye bye.